Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Wallace here in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm an evolutionary epidemiologist with the PCDC here with an update on the COVID-19 pandemic. This presentation is going to be a little bit more informal than our previous episodes. It's a holiday weekend and our video editors are on a well-deserved break. So I'll be presenting today's episode all in one take if possible. This week, we'll cover the state of global COVID, the state of US COVID, and for a second week running, the Biden administration's decision to sunset efforts to control and prevent the COVID pandemic here in the US. We'll begin with global COVID. In the graph in red, the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Research Center reports a decrease of 4.9 million new confirmed COVID cases worldwide for the week ending August 28th. That'll likely be the trend at least into the fall. As we discussed here on previous episodes of COVID This Week, COVID may re-enter its winter spike for a third year running, or as some evolutionary biologists propose, may enter a less seasonally obvious dynamic with so many people infected this summer acting as a kind of partial herd immunity. Time, however, will tell. We see here the number of global weekly deaths there in white declined to 15,500 confirmed deaths this past week. In green, we see an increase to 53 million new vaccinations administered this week worldwide. This New York Times map shows hotspots over the past week in Europe, Asia, and Australasia. There in purple, Austria, Slovenia, Serbia, Greece, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan remain epicenters in average daily new cases per 100,000 population. Italy, Latvia, Australia, and New Zealand are no longer in the top category, but remain COVID strongholds. Germany and Russia hosted increases in caseloads this past week, and we see decreases in Peru, Chile, Finland, Norway, Romania, and Mongolia. This week, we switched from the 7-day average of daily confirmed COVID cases per population that we've been using to cumulative cases per million people so we can better see the dynamics of some of the more recent hard-hit countries we identified in the previous map. We can see the spike in cases when Omicron emerged in late 2021. We also see the present hotspots in the previous map are trending in different directions. South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan continue to report strong increases. Austria, Slovenia, Latvia, and Serbia show steady increases. Greece is showing a leveling off of its stepwise increases, which are likely a function of its reporting system. The US continues its months-long post-winter surge, if also at a relatively lesser national rate compared to other countries. Russia is hosting a slow increase, notable only as until recently it reported little in the way of COVID. This week, we also switched from COVID deaths per million people for the countries from our caseload series to cumulative deaths per million to better see recent trends. During our spring to summer Omicron, we see Brazil, Finland, Greece, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand with strong surges in COVID deaths. Other countries hit hard with caseloads have suffered less in COVID deaths, including the United States, Slovenia, Latvia, Russia, Serbia, and Japan. But as we discussed in previous episodes of COVID This Week, many countries in Eastern Europe, including Latvia, Russia, and Serbia, are reporting wide disparities between their COVID deaths and their overall excess mortalities. That is, they are likely suffering more COVID deaths than reported. If the world is finally entering its seasonal COVID decline, a welcome development, a global caseload of nearly 5 million new infections this week still offers the virus plenty of material to experiment with, solving whatever herd immunities we can muster and our vaccines. Indeed, we find molecular changes from the root of the SARS-2 tree here, numbering as high as 65 amino acid changes and 16 deletions. That is, SARS-2 continues to evolve. Overall, we see in the dark blues and purples the early variants like alpha and beta. In the light blue are samples of the Delta variant. We also see over the past 6 months that multiple Omicron subvariants, they're in yellow, BA1 and 2, in the light and medium orange is BA4 and 5, and the darker orange BA2.12 are continuing to explore SARS-2's evolutionary space. We see in the few red samples the early August arrival of subvariant BA2.75, or the Centaurus variant, which was first found in India, but no new samples have been sequenced since. And that might be a matter of a true disappearance or lack of sequencing resources in Centaurus's geographic centers. We see many of the Omicron subvariants are in circulation together, except a couple of the BA.2 clades, indicating Omicron may be conducting parallel experimentation with us in an almost industrial fashion. Indeed, science teacher Ryan Hisner noted a variety of such newbies have been identified. For instance, BJ.1, BH.1, BA2.10.4, BA2.76.1, and BA2.75 are found in India alone. All those are rapidly expanding in their caseloads. On his own, Hisner identified a BA2.3 subvariant with a jump of 10 new mutations in the spike protein and wide geographic spread, including samples found in Singapore, Australia, and the US. Some of these subvariants will make it onto the global stage, some won't. But the greater the variation, the faster the convergence on the next COVID superstar strain. The policy of flattening the curve many countries have now abandoned was as much an evolutionary intervention aimed at slowing down COVID adaptation as protecting our hospital capacity. Turning to the US, we see the country remains moving in two different directions. On the one hand, this New York Times map shows much of the country in a slight decline in caseloads per 100,000 from a couple of weeks ago. The Northeast, Upper Midwest, the coastal Southeast, the Rockies, and much of the West Coast are presently characterized by a relative decline in COVID. The Plain State still hosts pinpricks of counties still badly hit by outbreaks, with clusters in Oklahoma and Kansas, but there's still a relative decline overall. On the other hand, in a different direction, Appalachia, from eastern West Virginia down through western Virginia, much of Kentucky, all of Tennessee, although slightly in better shape this week, and down into northern Mississippi, and now nearly all of Alabama is getting rocked. Alaska's outbreak appears suddenly in welcome retraction. Puerto Rico, after months in full outbreak, appears to be hinting at an island-wide decline, although some towns still remain significantly hit. But this is how epidemics allowed to spread on their own work. Countries undergoing broad retraction never fully escape their pandemic because the virus survives in redoubts from which it launches new attacks. We might ask, did CDC send special teams or additional supplies to Appalachia to help squelch that epicenter? No, it did not. It reminds us of historian Mike Davis's recent observation on the broader nature of our present governance overall. Davis says, quote, "Our ruling classes everywhere have no rational analysis or explanation for the immediate future. A small group of people have more concentrated power over the human future than ever before in human history, and they have no vision, no strategy, no plan," end quote. It's a point to which we'll return later this episode. There are other ways of tracking COVID. Indeed, the levels of SARS-2 virus detected in the wastewater that comes through our sewage plants, as reported here August 14th through the 28th, shows some, but not overall overlap with the previous caseload map. Sewage plants in red represent loads at 80 to 100% more than their previously recorded levels. And we see these scattered across the US, including places that the previous map showed were cooling off. These include Nebraska, Illinois, parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, northern Ohio, and upstate and downstate New York. We do see cooled off blues down the West Coast and parts of Colorado, Texas, Florida, and New Jersey. We see slightly different spatial dynamics in the change in sewage caseloads over the past 15 days. Seeing in red, for instance, select expanses in Florida, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, New York State, and here and there throughout the Southeast, showing 1,000% or more increases in SARS-2 detected. To sum up, here's a People CDC map of community transmission by county, devised in the spirit of epidemiologist Jason Salemi by our weather report team and our quant group, and mapped by Les Schaffer. Unlike the CDC map that we've been showing over the past few months using these data, we can now differentiate the high level of danger counties are subjected to beyond merely 10% COVID positivity. So we see here separated out counties that are very high in their exposure, that are high in exposure, very high, and in deep purple, extremely high in their exposure. Down at the bottom, we see that the People CDC also now differentiates exposure by both the percent of counties and by the percent of population. We see here that by population, 95% of the American people are in communities subjected to high to extremely high COVID exposure, especially across the lower Midwest, Appalachia, the Southeast, and moving west into Louisiana and Oklahoma. People CDC thinks the map better alerts the American people of their local exposure. It appears a wider swath of the US is now subjected to graver exposure than indicated by the New York Times map we began with. As we described in previous episodes of COVID This Week, such characterizations are increasingly difficult to navigate as the US government has permitted hospitals and health departments to redesignate COVID cases in a way that has reduced the number of confirmed cases and deaths. Social science Twitter account WSBGNL graphed out CDC data of national 7-day average daily COVID deaths in orange and CDC estimates of excess deaths in blue, showing since spring this year, the two measures have separated off, with excess deaths now double that of confirmed COVID deaths. In other words, by our very basic COVID data, we appear to be missing COVID's true mortality. The virus continues to evolve and spread, however the CDC characterizes the pandemic. We see here new variants first emerging and then dominating in cycles of every 2 months. The BA2 Omicron subvariant in pink was replaced by the BA 2.12 subvariant in orange, now apparently gone, and being replaced now by subvariants BA4 and 5 in the greens, with BA5 holding steady at 89% of new cases this week. We now also see the emergence of Omicron subvariant BA4.6 in blue, which this week increased to 7.5% of new cases. Now, for a second week running, we end COVID This Week on the U.S. response. With U.S. life expectancy down a second year in a row to 1996 levels, 400,000 Americans killed by COVID this past year, 15,000 in the past month, far outdistancing other nations. With long COVID accounting for 1 in 3 unfilled U.S. jobs in an economy in technical recession. With increasing evidence that all age groups, save the oldest, are accumulating increasing heart damage from COVID infections. And with the chief scientist of the World Health Organization warning of large increases in COVID-associated cardiovascular, neurological, and mental health disorders to come, this week, the President of the United States declared the COVID pandemic over. We've come a long way, President Biden tweeted. COVID no longer controls our lives. There are a record number of Americans working, businesses are growing, and our schools are open, even in the face of unrelenting attacks from the most powerful special interests in the country. We got it done, end quote. Saying we're back at going about our business isn't the same as we ended the COVID danger. A bipartisan political class has just written excess COVID deaths into an expropriative economy. So here we have excess deaths in California, shown across different occupations. And it's an economy that's treated as realer than the human well-being it claims to serve. Get back to work, suckers, appears the message. And given that the government has ended all COVID-related financial assistance, that's exactly what exhausted millions must understandably do. As corporate America was firmly behind reopening as far back as spring 2020, it isn't clear what powerful special interests are holding the administration back, as Biden declared in his tweet. Indeed, Biden won election in part on his vow to reverse the Trump administration's malignant neglect. 5 months into its term, the Biden administration rushed to give up, following corporate America's lead in rewriting the CDC's already tepid recommendations on mask mandates, quarantining, and testing. With the U.S. now ending sending free test kits by mail and planning on phasing out all aid paying for COVID tests and vaccines, many establishment epidemiologists who berated the Trump administration for its deadly neglect are going on record firmly lockstep with the Biden administration's efforts to end the pandemic by proclamation. The People CDC thinks otherwise. Its position is that we get through the COVID crisis by controlling the virus and preventing infections. And that's COVID This Week from the People CDC. You can learn more about the People CDC and read this week's COVID weather report at peoplecdc.org.